So in spite of the information I've given you, you don't necessarily know exactly how to evaluate or compare products. One of the tools that is often given to you is something like this table here, where you have something like a variety of different products, like benzoyl peroxide being compared to salicylic acid, in some function, such as its antibiotic or exfoliating function. And you're given these check marks or possible comments on it. And this is supposed to be used as your evaluation. The problem with these things is that they're often skewed to whatever the product is. So if you're trying to, obviously, they're trying to look at this, the first one here, this manolic acid, because it has all the check marks, and it only has basically a beneficial comment about it, where something like benzoyl peroxide has this alert, and not all of the check marks complete. So the idea is that this basically is skewing the direction and skewing the table in order to give a certain product an advantage over another. But it isn't a complete assessment. You have to take these assessments with a grain of salt. So hopefully the information I've given you before preludes to all of the information that I'm going to give you during this comparison, and the reasoning behind it. And it'll hopefully be much better than something like just a simple table evaluation, although these can, when done unbiasedly, be useful. So here we have a couple different products that Proactive regime has, and here are their ingredients. We have your benzoyl peroxide, which is first listed ingredient because it's the active ingredient, and then the inactive ingredients, which are listed by weight, are water, sodium, and then, there's a variety of different ones, but I'm just going to point out some of the ones that are probably most particular. So we have glycerin, we have a benzenate, and we also have linoleic acid, then we also have a glycolic acid, and a fragrance. Those are probably, there's other important ingredients here, but I would say if we're going to really target things, that's what you'd want to try and look at and evaluate. I'm not going to necessarily do that direct assessment, but what we can see is what are the commonalities between a treatment like that and let's say another treatment regime such as exposed. So again, for the pore targeting treatment of Proactive, you have benzoyl peroxide, water, you have glycerin, you have a little bit of different things. You have something like almond oil in there. Then you also have certain fatty acids, but still fragrance again. Then you have their complexion perfecting treatment. So then you also, so here we have linoleic salicylic acid, water, another couple different fatty acids, a root extract, and a couple different kinds of root extracts, a licorice root including in that category, and there's some oils, and again fragrance. Then there's also the bar, and looking at the concentrations, we can see that the bar is more acidic, or has a higher percentage of salicylic acid than the complexion perfecting treatment. Again, we can see that water isn't our first ingredient here because it isn't a fluid, so it actually is a couple different fatty acids, stearic acid being one of the primary components. Then we also have a fragrance, which is in a higher concentration than a couple other important or a couple other ingredients, which seems to indicate that it's it basically has more per weight, so it could, because of its higher quantity, have more of an issue as far as irritation is concerned. So now let's start the evaluation by going to exposed. This is just one last comparison of some of the topical treatments currently available for acne, and kind of compares their not just efficacy, but it seems to compare things like, do you need a prescription? Does it how is it administered? The side effects that go along with it, and what exactly it treats. So by reviewing this, you may get a better synopsis of what maybe you would like to go with. Although I would say that you've probably already tried benzoyl peroxide, salicylic acid, and then from there, that's why you're pursuing further evidence to see if you can get a better effect. However, it's good. This is a good graph to get a grasp of what some of the current treatments are, and how to go about treating yourself more. So, how this evaluation is being done, or this comparison is being done, how are these different than, let's say, something like proactive? How is exposed different from proactive? Well, this facial cleanser, we see a couple different ingredients. We see pentothal, which hasn't been there. We see citric acid. We still see fragrance oil in this case, and again, more extracts. So I would say that there isn't a dramatic difference. This disodium EDTA is also a commonality, as you can see in the acne treatment serum. It is there again. So now moving on to the clearing tonic treatment, you have again the salicylic acid, you have water, propylene glycol, different kinds of extracts to try and differentiate from other mainstream people. Here we have the green tea extract, and then we also have, again, oils. Now, acne treatment serum, you have water, glycerin, which is the fatty acid. You come back again to the green tea extract here, a couple other tea tree oil extracts, it seems, as well. And then now with the moisture complexion, we have water. One prominent thing is you just throw a couple different fatty acids to give it volume, and then there other seeming similarities seem to again be the addition of fragrance, which is in almost everything. The disodium EDTA actually is on the bottom here, near the green tea extract. You have something different, which is caffeine and sucrose, or sugar, so that's a bit different from other products. And you also have a pumpkin seed extract. So, I mean, exposed seems to be a very much more herbal based, although proactive does have some herbal extracts in their mixture. But again, concentrating on some of the similarities, we can see that at least as far as the active ingredients are concerned, these are relatively similar, because they all have benzoyl peroxide and salicylic acid. And when you're trying to do a scientific evaluation based on irritation and the efficacy of the product, you're going to really want to pay attention to the active ingredient in some of the more common irritants, like fragrances. So, as we can see, it doesn't appear to be at its face that much different from proactive. Because we don't have a full evaluation of some of the benefits of extracts, we can't necessarily say that something like Exposed is, you know, worlds apart from Proactive. And even including that, there is still ingredients in Proactive that seem to also have the extracts as well. So really, I guess if you're going to try and find a product that seems, or if we're going to try and compare these, it all comes down to how effective these extracts are at treating acne, more than how you know, certain concentrations of something, or more than different types of fragrances. It seems if you're going to consider that Exposed is maybe better than Proactive, you need to evaluate fragrances. So, which we really don't have the data for. So what I'm saying is, to make these comparisons are very difficult to do, and if you're ever going to try and pick a product that says it's worlds apart from any other product, just know that it's really hard to do such an evaluation, and most of those are being just heavily marketed and not necessarily heavily researched, despite saying we have clinical evidence. What they have is clinical evidence of their active ingredient, which everyone already does. So, and then they just have some sort of exotic ingredient to get you excited about the product. So when trying to do these comparisons, you need to be fairly pessimistic before you go jumping into something like that. So for our next product, we have X-Out. X-Out is a product that is run by Proactive underneath this different brand name. So why did Proactive need to make a different product? Well, one of the big differences between this product and Proactive is that it's a single-step process. So what this sort of speaks to is that a multi-step process isn't a necessary component of acne treatment, or at least doesn't send a strong enough benefit over a single-step process. I mean, that's not to say that it's conclusive, or that we still don't need to research more multi-step process. That's just simply a observation made that when you're trying to when your people market something like, oh, this is a multi-step amazing process, and then they go ahead and say, well, because people don't like to do multiple steps, here's this product. If it was worlds apart from a multi-step process is worlds apart from a single-step process, this would be rendered inadequate, whereas Proactive is still marketing this almost as hard as Proactive. So you can see that they really just care about money. Now, as far as when they're trying to make sort of statements like that. So how is this product different from an ingredient perspective? Well, we can see that there's benzoyl peroxide, which is at an 8.5 concentration, which is much higher than the 2.5, which has been shown to be most beneficial and least irritating. So why did they increase this concentration? Well, there possibly could be a select population that may benefit by a higher concentration, but it really there's no solid evidence to showcase that. I mean, even when you're evaluating something like Proactive, it's very difficult, or any ingredient, it's very difficult to solicit the exact benefit. So when you're changing this sort of concentration and going against the grain in order to try and find this, this tiny niche population that may benefit from a higher benzoyl peroxide concentration, you're really stretching out. So this is not a product that I would recommend off the bat. Now, going into the inactive ingredients, we can see that there's water, a couple other familiar ingredients such as glycerin. We also have a benzenate, which and then we also have some linoleic acid, and a key part of their campaign is the feeling of freshness. This feeling of freshness is the methanol, which is the same thing that gives Vicks Vapor Rub its cooling sensation. I'm mixed as far as this sort of ingredient. Maybe at very low concentrations it could provide some benefit, but it's not something I would really desire out of a product. It just, again, gives this cooling sensation, but there's also potential for an irritation to result from it. Again, I am very aware of sensitivities that people can have, and so I'm a little bit more biased to trying to find the least aggravating ingredients, and trying to say that methanol is necessarily a great ingredient because of its cooling sensation wouldn't give it much. It doesn't allow for the idea that methanol can also be irritating, and so because of that, I don't recommend it. So what I'm saying is, it's irritating. It could have some benefit, but that benefit isn't outweighed by its potential irritation. And because it's just one of the most marketed concepts from X-Out, it makes me very wary that you're trying to perceive the benefit of this product by this feeling of coolness and tingling and quote-unquote freshness. So because of that pseudo effect, I'm very skeptical of an ingredient like methanol. It also has fragrance in this. So, I mean, really, these are products that are almost the same. And so trying to find something that really differentiates itself while still sticking to the research and what works is apparently very difficult to do. Maybe eventually I'll come out with my own product that meets my criteria, but for now, this is the way you should be trying to do your evaluations of products, looking at ingredients, looking at the similarities of the ingredients, and then referencing all the information I've given you to do basically a efficacy evaluation of the product. Post-marketing side effects. So these are side effects that are occurring after the product is mass-produced and marketed to the public. So these side effects could be very severe in nature and still not be published for a couple different reasons. One, they're not being reported. They're falling below relevance of 1%. It could have been seen but not fully explored, and it's also hard to quantize risk when evaluating these post-marketing side effects because they're not being studied in a controlled environment. So there needs to be it seems to be there's a larger margin of error. So even if it is 1%, someone might say, well, it's 1% that people are having these anaphylactic reactions in association with their product, but that doesn't mean that it's our product. You know, only if it's like I don't know what the margin of error. There's discretion used in assessments that aren't necessarily written in stone, but I would say there would need to be like a 10% increase, or 5 to 10% increase in something like an anaphylactic reaction for post-marketing side effects to be reevaluated and put back on. So just knowing that not necessarily all the side effects and treatments have been reviewed when you're being given a product is certainly something that is kind of scary and something that also needs to be concerned with, and we need to draw attention to it in order to get better treatments in order to find a cure.
So we have a growing comprehension of the tools used to treat acne. One tool that's often talked about is exfoliation. So the first thing is that there's two types of exfoliation. There's chemical, something like a Clarisonic, and then there's chemical, something like an acid peel. So the premise of these is that it removes cornified skin cells, calloused or dead skin, that then can reveal more rejuvenated, healthy skin at the bottom. This is an aesthetic appeal, but the other aspect is that there's an element where that is reducing or removing cell adhesion factors, and therefore not allowing skin cells to coalesce and form plug. One of the big things, though, is that there is redness and photosensitivity, and there's also flaking that can occur with these, which can be not necessarily aesthetically pleasing. The other element is that acne sufferers typically have a thin, damaged skin barrier. And particularly when I'm talking about barrier, I'm talking about the small stratum corneum. And because this is so sensitive, it results in potentially over-exacerbation of the immune system in response to some of these chemical peels or in response to mechanical damage. So we're going to talk a little bit more about what my preferences are and about these individual methods.
There are many different forms of mechanical exfoliation. One which is fairly familiar with people is Clarisonic, which is basically a skin brush that is said to brush away the dead skin cells on your face and reveal a lighter and more rejuvenated looking skin. There's also other sort of face brushes, things that are rubberized, things with bristles, but my favorite form of mechanical exfoliation is actually a wet towel. These can actually soften the skin with the hydration that adds to it, and then is able to basically remove some of the components that can be adhered to your skin and even in your skin pores, although it's fairly difficult to get in the depth of the pore unless you have fairly dilated pores. There's also microdermabrasion, which can also be combined with something like a vitamin C. This can also assist with the keratinization or elimination of the keratin and the adhesion molecules that grip to the skin and again coalesce. So this can cause sort of exfoliation and can be used not only from an aspect of trying to eliminate clogs, but also can be used as a anti-scarring or scar rejuvenation method. There are side effects like bleeding and redness and pain, and for the most part you don't want to do something like a microdermabrasion unless you're actually, this is 100% true. I would never recommend doing a microdermabrasion if you have active lesions. You could do something like an exfoliation, a lighter exfoliation with a brush or bristles. My preference is with a wet towel, because that's where I've seen the best results. But you definitely never want to, again, you never want to do a microdermabrasion when you have active lesions, because it's really just going to expose the skin to the bacteria that's on your surface of your skin and cause more redness, more damage. Chemical exfoliation can be used just like mechanical exfoliation in the sense that it can be for alleviating scars and then also trying to alleviate acne lesions. The more harsh the acid and the more concentrated, it is starting to lean towards less treating of lesions and more treating of scars. And to be honest, I would preference the lighter acids overall. I mean, I don't see tremendous benefits, especially in early stages of acne, to use harsh acids on the skin. So something like an lactic acid would be good, or a malic acid, citric acid, glycolic acids. These are all lighter. Those are called AHA acids, and there's several different varieties that are continued throughout some botanical cosmetics, but those are the ones that I would probably lean towards. There's BHA, which is propionic acid, and really though, whenever you're going to be talking about a BHA, something has BHA and AHA in it. It's a fancy marketing term, but 90% of the time BHA is just referencing salicylic acid. No one's really using propionic acid, one thing that's produced by P. acne actually. So you would think maybe you wouldn't want to use the same thing that is being produced by P. acne. Potentially maybe you would, but for respect of the general thought process of current cosmetics, you would just use salicylic acid, even though salicylic acid, as I believe I've shown you, is not really necessarily a dominating benefit. So, as one of the other methods that you could use. So there's TCA, which is a very powerful chemical exfoliant. Then there's also a great variation in the concentration and the time and preparation. So there's a number of different ways that these acids can be modified in their application, in their treatment. So deciding which one to use is actually fairly difficult. Specific evaluations of these different methods will be done in other videos, but for this video it's more or less just to get you familiarized with the types of treatment that you can use, and we'll do a total assessment in other videos. So laser therapy is one of the therapies similar to Accutane, which seems to, in my opinion, have the highest perceived efficacy, meaning that laser is above cosmetics and Roaccutane is above other cosmetic therapies. So if you're going to get laser treatment, a lot of people seem to think that it's likely that, oh, they're going to have a really good result. Even though the efficacy of them is not necessarily outstanding and is short-lived. You have to get continuous treatment, and it's not a prolonged period, but the results in certain select individuals can be, in certain instances, profound. But that can be said of any treatment, that you can find any treatment where one individual can have miraculous results, but the idea is that you have to shift the average to being higher, and then you have to equate all of the different variables that come with treatment, such as cost and how long the treatment actually lasts for. But there's there's photodynamic therapy, there's pulse laser, there's blue light therapy, there's fractal lasers, there's isolays. There's a number of different laser therapies, and there's even something called light therapy. Does light cure acne? In order to make that question come into reality, there's certain things you need to understand. So radioactive light, UV light I should say, around 415 nanometers, which is blue in nature, can selectively destroy bacteria, P. acne bacteria. So in that thought process, you could suggest that light can have a therapeutic effect. There's also the 830 wavelength and the 633 wavelength that seems to have anti-inflammatory benefit. But the element that most people seem to be missing is the fact that this wavelength needs to be combined with, energy over a specific area. So you can't just say, oh, we have this wavelength. You need to have a certain energy output. Not only do you need a certain energy output, but you also need a certain energy output per square centimeter in order to actually have the beneficial effect. And these are some units of measurement, and there's also one called photo intensity, and it seems to be 50 plus photo intensity is the kind of work over a specific area that you would get a therapeutic effect by. Anything sub this is said to be insufficient. So these exposures could be met suboptimally by the sun. So maybe the sun doesn't have the output that's getting to your face specifically necessary to meet this requirement, but one thing to also consider is that this is a lot of work done over a lot of time. So maybe there's other benefits that we haven't yet to see for 6 hours sitting in the sun. So you could see some benefit also because there's a variety of different wavelengths that are being projected onto your face. However, something like your phone light, certain apps saying, oh, get rid of your acne with this blue light or this flashing light, in order to get that sort of energy output per area, you would need to have a ridiculous battery, one that would probably end up exploding, and you would also probably have a very dead battery. So this basically says that the sun could have benefit, but your phone really is not going to have any benefit. There's other elements to light therapy and laser therapy, such as using vacuum technology to suck up the pore specifically and expose the light. Instead of over the entire area, you're getting it exposed to a smaller area and more concentrated, which sort of minimizes or is said to minimize the side effects because you have more targeted therapy. And you can get closer to the bacteria, and the other layers of the skin don't have as much exposure and damage to them. So that is a basic assessment of, and that you can see that sort of take place in the bottom corner here, right hand corner. So that basically is a summation of light therapy and laser therapy. Again, specific treatments can be better assessed in later videos, but this is again to get your feet wet and to sort of look at and tease out, tentacle out, and feel out different literature bases upon this video. Acupoint or cupping and acupuncture therapy could be effective. There's some suggestion that it's effective, but whether it's by reducing stress or some actually active process is yet to be determined. There's also the placebo effect to recount, but when done with other therapies, maybe a doxycycline or a epiduo treatment, a vitamin A and a benzoyl peroxide treatment, you could have some additional benefit, something that could be really stated and something that could act synergistic. But the thing is, again, is that we need more data. It's really unfortunate that there's so many gaps in something that's been plaguing the 21st century for so long, but the literature just isn't there. It's not of high enough quality, and it's not redundant enough for us to be super reliant on. A lot of people have the impression that, oh, this study came out. Well, the study could be flawed. The study could be this. So we need to have more redundant information, more redundant studies. But a lot of people look for something to hold on to, and that's what I'm trying to give you. That something which you can possess and develop further into something that could be, or a knowledge basis that can be suitable for using as a treatment for acne when combined with your doctor. So now we're finally on to scarring. Scarring is a major issue with acne, and actually in most dermatologists see it as the largest issue because it can be so long-standing and affects adults, which is what they also are. It seems that there is some personal understanding with that, so they have a little bit more empathy towards scarring and its prevention. So what are we talking about when we're talking about scarring, and how does it occur? Well, for one, there's accelerated proliferation phase. There's this is how you heal, basically. There's stagnant remodeling phase, TIMPs versus MIMPs, which is basically these are proteins that are occurring that kind of basically degrade things and form them. So there's poor nutrients. Sleep may be affecting things, but it's not 100% sure how it is infecting and the degree it is. So more severe lesions may increase the risk. Hypodermis involvement, so meaning that the deeper a lesion is, the more likely it is to scar. And we could say that picking lesions and scabs and physical abrasion are going to cause a further increase in the risk of scarring. So this may be a poor way of evaluating the risk of scars, but if you were going to suggest what happens when you cut yourself. So if you have a very superficial cut, let's just say it's a scrape. Usually a scrape won't scar, but let's say if you cut yourself with a knife, well then, let's say on your finger or something, that is much more, it seems to be that scars with a higher degree. So the amount of physical destruction that occurs is going to increase the involvement of different proteins, and it's going to increase the involvement of scar tissue. So at the same level as if you have a big scar in your hand, or a big cut in your hand, do you want that to heal quickly, or do you want that to heal slowly? The body seems to have an ability to understand how severe the damage is, and if that damage is very severe, it will heal as fast as possible. And unfortunately what that means is a lot of fibroblast involvement and a lot of collagen being spewed out, but not necessarily in an organized manner, which means that it's scar tissue. Scar tissue isn't, cells, multiple cells stacked on each other. It's generally just a lot of collagen that has formed. So there's also on this bottom, there's this graph, basically the steps that go about healing. So you have an inflammatory phase, which you have certain things like tumor growth factor, and then you also have IGF-1 and a couple different cytokines. You also have on the top there the normal healing and versus basically excessive scarring. So that's how those are different, and this is what seems to be a driver of long-term scars. As you can see, with normal healing, you do have spikes in inflammation, but those generally heal quickly or remit pretty quickly. Then you have cell proliferation, so you can actually get the cells back into to fill out the gaps. And then you also have matrix remodeling. So regardless of how much or little you end up cutting yourself, there's always going to be some fibroblast involvement, but those will be degraded over time as the matrix remodels itself and as cells turn over. However, when you have an excessive scarring, you have very little remodeling, you have a high degree of cell proliferation and fibroblast involvement and collagen, and this is causing the issue. So there's risk factors for scars, and it's suggested to be one of them is the more severe lesions, but we're going to take a break on that for a moment, and so we can move on, because this is kind of a complex, well, this is definitely a complex topic that involves many different areas. So there are different types of acne scars. There are ice pick scars, there are boxcar scars, rolling scars, and hypertonic scars. So, in hypertonic being basically colloidal scars. So, you've seen these in many individuals, I'm sure, but by identifying what these look like and how they're shaped, you can somewhat predict how they'll heal and how well they'll respond to treatment. So there's some description in the table about each individual scar and their depth and some of the other characteristics of them, but I'm sure the visual is enough. And we may talk about some of the benefits of the treatment, but or response rates of different scars, which I think is important for people when they're being assessed, in order to predict their treatment success. But that is a specific question that is kind of hard to answer, but I'll go through the research and try and find it. Understanding when a specific acne lesion will scar and when it will not scar is actually a very difficult prediction to make. There is some agreement though with regards to scarring. Keloidal scars are an increased risk for African Americans, meaning scars that are raised and have a high degree of collagen in them are typically more common in African Americans. The older you are, the more likely you are to have a scar from acne. The only thing is to say that scarring is a risk, or age is a risk factor for scarring, cannot necessarily be made, because the longer you have acne, it's in odds that one of the lesions would cause you to have a scarring in that time frame. So, but what it should be looked at is whether or not being older and having either no or very minimal acne for an extended period of time. Let's say you had acne when you were 16 to 20, and since 25 to 40 you haven't had any acne lesions, but now around 40 or so you're somehow getting acne lesions that are causing scarring. We can compare those that prevalence of scarring in those people to the scarring in younger people and see whether or not age is a risk factor. But right now we just know that there's a correlation built behind aging and scarring. There is some difficulty, again, even further here, when you're assessing whether or not something with a severe lesion will actually give you acne. So or give you scarring. Some people would suggest that the boils or cysts are more likely to scar, but it doesn't even necessarily mean that's true. As you can see, you've seen some of the pock marks that are on people's faces. and those are not necessarily big, big chunks of the face that are missing. They're little tiny hypertonic scars. So we can't use that as a risk. Now, one thing is there may be like a purple characteristic, and this is anecdotal from my opinion. The more agitated the single papule looks, it could say that there's a risk factor. You could say there's a risk factor for acne. I mean, what would be great is if we had pictures of people who have begun to get scars and assess the difference between that person's pimple and the next person. We don't really necessarily have a great visual collection to showcase something like that. So if we built that as a community, that would be really awesome. So there is an element that the quicker you get rid of the acne condition or mitigate it, the less likely you'll have a scar. So again, that's a time thing, like in an odds ratio. So trying to get rid of your acne is the fastest way, or is the best way to ensure that you don't have scarring, and that's why dermatologists push for it. Unfortunately, it can be kind of difficult to do that, but hopefully this program is going to be helping you. So there's some people who speculate, and the ones that are starred are actually straight from the American Dermatology Association, I believe it's called, and so their assessment is that picking, squeezing, and popping acne lesions are a cause for acne scarring. But the thing is, in people that I've alluded to earlier when we were talking about this, picking and squeezing, I didn't see, there hasn't been a full assessment, but I didn't see these people having a higher prevalence of scarring. You would expect if they have this, the condition where you're ended up like basically picking every part of your face apart, that you would end up you would get scars from that. But it doesn't seem to necessarily increase the prevalence. So there's also, if you have a blood relative that ends up having a lot of acne scars, it's predictable that you will as well. But that the degree of that risk is not necessarily fully assessed either. There's a lot of gaps with all the money that goes into things. They're trying to basically treat acne. There's not a lot, it seems, that is going to understand it, and that's one thing that I want to push for even more, is a complete understanding and filling in these holes in the research, and also rebacking the research that we already have. So that scarring is a really difficult topic to discuss. And the last thing I'll leave with, though, is that I do believe that if your hypodermis is involved, you're more likely to have an acne lesion. So if you have a big, if you have a deep recessed pimple, not necessarily this vesicle on your face, but a deep, hard pimple in your face that grows with depth again and involves the hypodermis, I would say that's a pimple that would end up giving you an acne lesion, or a scar, I should say. Alright, so we have a little bit more to discuss with regards to scarring.
So this is the types of scar therapy that can be used. There's dermabrasion, chemical peels, fat replacement, ablation, and laser. For the most part, most of those are self-explanatory. Fat replacement basically is when you have a indentation in your skin, and they will remove fat from your body and then fat in that particular area to plump it up and make it even and flush with the rest of the area. It's sort of used in conjunction with ablation, which basically is when you have skin that's adhered to your basal layer, and what they do is or scar tissue that's adhering the basal layer to your stratum corneum, and that what they basically do is they rough up the basement membrane a bit and that scar tissue in order to basically remove the scar tissue and let that area raise up. But it usually doesn't have the same fullness, so then that's where fat replacement can kind of come in and add some of the fullness necessary. Laser therapy, those are that use a certain laser, or whether it's fractal laser or another. Over in the top right hand corner you can see some of the results, which do seem very significant. I would say that there's a certain degree of hope for anyone who has severe scarring, but working into a better understanding of scarring, what results in it, and its therapies will be done in a different video. So another important side effect of acne is hyper and hypopigmentation. This is basically when you have something that is an acne lesion that has seamlessly left a continuous mark, has dyed your skin, or in the sense of hyperpigmentation. There's also hypopigmentation, which is the absence of color. Melanocyte stimulating hormone stimulates a molecule called melanin, the compound that helps us keep us safe from the UV rays. Now, that is also in this sort of relationship with melanocyte stimulation, differentiation, attraction, and breakdown. All of the UV rays and other elements can basically attract melanocytes to a particular area, cause the secretion of the melanin, and also other elements cause the breakdown of the melanin. So working together, working out what why acne or post-inflammatory pigmentation results in this, results in what it is, would require a better comprehension of this melanocyte relationship. One thing that we can go on, though, before we can help preference us to understand the condition, is that people with increased risk are those who are Asian and African Americans. Caucasians aren't really at risk, not aren't at risk, but aren't as at high risk as these individuals, because it seems logical to assume that the melanocytes are more regularly capable of producing pigmentation, and that any pigmentation that is not there is much more apparent than in those who are white in color. Now, there's a couple different conditions that result in another increased risk. So, vitiligo, I'm probably saying that wrong, but is the lack of melanocytes. Melasma is the overproduction or abundance of too many melanocytes, and it seems potentially possible that birth control could have a role in this. Another interesting aspect is that scabs, meaning a lesion that has dried over and then you've picked, potentially has some influence on these melanocytes, because from anecdotal evidence of myself, I know that something that has been picked is much more likely to have a post hypopigmentation, not so much hyperpigmentation, and that could just be the result of the scar tissue not allowing for the melanocytes to be integrated into the tissue. So or the fibroblasts on, allowing the melanocytes to migrate. Now, which is basically redundant, but still. So those are some of the elements to hyper and hypopigmentation. Now let's look at some diagrams to show us more about that. So as you can see, this is the constitutive pigmentation state. So basically the state that you're usually in, you're typically in without any environmental pressure. You have transformation growth factor beta acting on certain receptors and then other components integrated into that allow the melanocyte to produce melanin and then transfer that into the keratinocytes, which then dyes them. Now, with UV radiation, you have the alpha melanocyte stimulating hormone that acts and that results in an increased level of melanocyte or melanin being produced by the melanocyte. There's also an element of inflammatory induced recruitment, and that this is primarily what we can be focused on, I feel, when we're trying to think of post-inflammatory or post-inflammatory pigmentation or hypopigmentation. So you have IFNY, and that this is basically acting in order to inhibit certain elements of the production of melanocytes that reduce the melanocyte from stimulating melanin, and then as a result you have a hypopigmentation. And because this could actually have an influence on hypopigmentation, the reverse can be said to potentially be possible, that and seems to be the case in the case of acne, that inflammatory components end up causing either an increase in melanin or a fluctuation in melanin that results in hypopigmentation, which then eventually dyes the skin cells. And you can see at this bottom graph certain components that are resulting in how we're naturally supposed to be dyed, our skin is supposed to be dyed. This is something that really needs to be looked into further, and unfortunately, as you can probably tell, it's not the focus of this this lecture. It is more just a presentation of information. Scientists versus marketers. Basically, what a scientist has declared an oath to do, more or less, is to find the truth of information and present it to the world and produce knowledge, basically. A marketer is made to sell product. So these are obviously somewhat conflicting, because a marketer is basically, their job is to embellish, and they loosely rely on the scientists to give them something, some truth to embellish to some extraordinary extent. So with Proactive, they're actually not even a part of the scientific crew that's developed the product. You have this Gurtharan Rinkerer, I can't pronounce the name, but they spent about $200 million for their marketing team. So you basically have this organization that will market your product, right? And you come with them with a product, and you give them a certain amount of money, and then they push the product. They know nothing about that product, more or less. They know certain minimal points of highlighting, and then they go and push the product. Whatever it is if you give them enough money, they'll push the product for you. So you're not hearing it from the scientists, and whatever scientists you're usually hearing it from are generally in the back pockets of the marketers. So you really can't say that any of these testimonies are necessarily valid. Now, this can be said with the use of certain celebrities, bands, and the use of celebrities is actually banned in some countries, like Australia. So we use people like Jessica Simpson and Justin Bieber, among many others, that have basically been hired in order to sell the product, because all of a sudden we find this someone who's relatable. We humanize this celebrity that we used to basically admire and think, oh, wish I was like them, that's how they got to be like them. Not necessarily true. So, because of that impressionability, and also because of the impressionability of teenagers, you really don't want something like that skewing your choice of selection of which product is healthy for you, or which product is going to cure your acne. You don't want your own infatuation with Justin Bieber to cause you to make a poor product selection. It preys on desperation. So let's say you have, this is a little bit over dramatic, but in certain cases it's not. Let's say you have someone who's dying of cancer, and someone comes up to you and says, I have a cure for cancer. How many questions are you going to ask about that? Say, I want $20, it's a cure for cancer. I guarantee it. They push it. They not only guarantee it, but they over the hill it. They say, this is the best. This has been backed by every scientist you ever known. You can ask all your friends, doesn't matter, but you gotta buy it. It's an absolutely amazing product. How many questions are you going to ask when you're back against the door, when maybe other people you've tried have failed to give you something that to solve your, let's say, your mother's issue? You're not, it's very difficult to back someone down and say no. You're at your wit's end. You're desperate. Because of that desperation, you're basically begging to get an excuse to give someone your money. You're trying to give away your money because you're hoping that at some level you're going to hit something that's helpful. And because of this horrific paradigm that we have, marketers can really prey on teenage parents and teenagers and themselves at any age, really. And desperate people, unfortunately, it's hard to remain critical when you're desperate. So keeping that in mind, try and be as humble about whatever product you're pushing, if you're pushing a product, and try and be and scrutinize anything that you come across. Don't have faith in something that you're believing in for its idealism rather than its facts. You like the idea of, let's say, Justin Bieber, but do you actually like him as a person? You have to work that out. Personally, I have nothing to say positively about him or negatively necessarily. So it showcases exceptional results. So these marketers, they'll use someone who is the 1% of the people that they've used their product that seem to have these remarkable results, and they'll hand select them, and then they'll give them certain value of money. Oh, we used your picture, so here's free product for life or something, or a day, or a month. But basically they're trying to find people who have had remarkable results and that aren't necessarily influenced by their product. They could be, but not to that extent, and who's to say that Proactive was the only thing that they did. So because of this exceptional results marketing in these tiny footnotes at the bottom of commercials that say you can these are exceptional results and you should not expect these. If you're showing me them like that, I should expect it. Show me if that's not what I can expect, then show me what I can expect. I don't know why you're showing me something that's exceptional, showing me the 1 percentile. And it's fair to mention that, hey, here's the lower end of people's results, here's the middle end, and here's the upper end. Do a couple photo comparisons of those people and interview those people, and that's a marketing campaign. Don't give me this 1% of the individuals that have actually had remarkable results. That's pretty bogus. Again, this kind of goes into the same aspect I was saying before. They handpick images. They reward those who send the pictures. There's no way to necessarily verify they've used the product. There's one product that actually goes and says, based on results of a worldwide customer satisfaction survey, which include 100 participants that were exposed to skincare or exposed skincare customers. Survey dates 6-9 to 6-10/2009. So the first thing you think is that these participants have been surveyed for a day. They surveyed one day, and that's kind of bogus, because you're trying to say that you surveyed 100 participants over one day, and all of a sudden you found a 96% customer satisfaction survey, or whatever it was. That's what they were pushing. They were pushing that they're one of the best satisfactions of any other commercial product. And if you fish, and if you sift through weeks and weeks or days and days of surveys, and you hand select which ones are best, of course you're going to find, the best one. One day in 100 surveys is not enough to end up with positive or accurately representative information. I mean, this is the most bogus survey I've ever heard of. Not to mention the most biased. So, likely took, this is a reiteration of that survey, likely took the best day to report. It's 2004, it's time for an update. So, this is on, it's 2015, last time I checked it was about 2004. They posted the survey 5 years, 6 years ago now, and it's still up there. You don't think you can take a new survey, see how many people? Do at least once a year if you're gonna even try and make this relevant. Just as you should understand your dermatologists and your estheticians and their education, you should also understand your supplements. You could ask for a certificate of analysis from the manufacturer to make sure the products are all in there, whatever they say they are. You could also ask your pharmacist about this sort of medication. I would go over their credentials, but they're, again, extensive, just like the dermatologist, but they're not as specific to the skin. There's also some supplements which may be available at pharmacy, like vitamin D, prenatal vitamins, that have an increased quality assurance. So you could get this certificate of analysis, and you may not necessarily get it from a third party, whereas something from the pharmacy could actually have additional certification behind it, and be more valid for that reason. Also more expensive, unfortunately. But so those are some of the things that you can do in order to understand your supplements further. along with doing your own independent research, which I hope you've done, and also look at product reviews and look at side effects. Go from the worst or 1-star ratings of the reviews and then progress your way up. Never look at the top, I cleared my acne in 2 days, or whatever. Always look at the worst and expect that you would probably have something similar to that. And then sort of hope that you can have a more positive result. Marketers will hype up not only products but specific ingredients or elements and steps all in one. So they'll use like a sodium chlorothiryl hyosine, and they'll say it's made from the palm trees, sunshine. Steel drums. This natural sulfate-free cleanser is derived from coconuts and conditions as it cleans dirt and debris from the pore. Don't worry, it doesn't smell like coconut, because why would you want your face to smell like coconut? And polyurethane beads, smooth round beads that exfoliate dead skin cells and help keep pores clear and make way for acne medicine. All these sound interesting, and they're suggesting mechanisms, but they're not backed. And just because something, again, is natural doesn't mean it's not harmful. Cyanide can be found in rice, but if you extract it and you put it in a product and you eat it, you could die. So these elements, these things really shouldn't matter to you. What should matter to you is hard science. Nothing said here should really matter. None of the fancy words should matter. What should matter is hard facts and results and statistics. Essential fatty acid, natural tocopherol, a sciencey word basically meaning moisture. So this helps counteract dryness, strengthens the lipid barrier, for healthier looking skin. Glycerin draws moisture into the skin and helps maintain natural balance to keep skin soft and smooth. Methanol. Who'd have thought the stuff in mint leaves would create the icy slap that X-Out is known for? Not only can it help wake you up, but it leaves the skin feeling invigorated and clean. So don't let the need for and desire for a cure allow people to steal your money. Don't let the false hope that marketing has to corrupt your mind. Work through information and then get results. You unfortunately cannot rely on the scientific community yet entirely, and you certainly cannot rely on marketers or the industry, skincare industry, to give you the results that are personalized for you. I hate to do this again, but don't fall for marketing jargon. Don't go for the high in nutrient, powerful antibiotic, world's best detox herb is an antibiotic, antiviral, anti-inflammatory, anti-antigenic, anti-comedogenic, anti. Everything's anti, everything's not, everything's clear, everything's perfect. The terminology that they use is so excessive, and there's nothing that they usually have to back it. It is covered in, unfortunately, it's covered in unsubstantiated evidence. So what you can do is you can ask, how is it chemically different? Is the vehicle different, or is the active ingredient different? Just being mindful. Again, doing things like looking at product reviews, go from the worst to the best. Look at 3 different studies on the active ingredients. See one pessimistic, one positive, one maybe neutral, and try and look for meta-analysis and systematic. systematic reviews. More is not necessarily better, such as something like benzoyl peroxide. Just because something says it has 10 times more than the, or it says it's a pharmacy grade, does not necessarily mean it's better. It just means that it has more of something, and until you review evidence that says better is actually better for you, you can say otherwise. And actually what's typical is more will result in a higher risk of side effects. So keeping that in mind, if you're thinking that your skin is drying out because of benzoyl peroxide and you go for a higher one, and your acne gets worse, well, that's not the avenue. I mean, the idea is that you use a conjunction of therapies, and the ones that I've included, reduction in certain elements of dietary foods, stress reduction, avoidance of certain excessive nutrients like B12, B6, stress reduction, adequate sleep. These are all things you can use in conjunction with the right therapy and in conjunction with the directions of your doctor. And because it's a system, it's much better than any single chemical or active ingredient that can be said of. It's a collective, and it's a way to work through and limit side effects. That's the idea. All that said, you should also take into account certain elements that can be informative to have. So an esthetician versus dermatologist, who should you go to? Well, an esthetician, their schooling is about 600 hours, or roughly 6 months. They require a high school diploma, or must be 17 plus. So you can be an esthetician at 18, easy. So basically 17 and a half, you can be an esthetician. That's pretty young, if you ask me. And how much do you really know? I mean, if you knew, how much can you really know specifically about acne when your entire degree is covered in 6 months, and you can get it when you're 18 or 17 and a half? Now, with dermatologists, certain medical testing, this is absurdly rigorous. They have to take this standardized test called the TOFL, and then after that, they get a medical degree, and the top 15% of their sophomore class ends up going on to pursue further. So there's different types of degree paths. There's a master's, which is a 2-year, or a doctorate, which is a 4-year. There's also a non-degree routes, which is a 1-year standard diploma, or more advanced certified clinical dermatology diploma. But in any event, you still have to go through a lot more schooling that can be specific to treatment of medical conditions, also keeping into, and medications, also keeping into account that this requires a college diploma, and then you can get into medical school, and then you can get your medical degree, and then you can work through the top 15% of your class. Dermatology is much more rigorous. It's not to say that estheticians don't have more clinical hours, because if that information is still not relevant to what you're to acne, then they're learning about any number of things like skin cancer and other things, whereas an esthetician could just be focusing all of their 6 months on acne. Which one's better for you? Well, I want somebody that is multiverse, but I also want someone who has a directive focus on something like acne. Eventually I'll go over some of the individuals who wrote certain books that are probably leaders in the field of acne.